Before you spin that 1992D Washington quarter, stop for a moment and take a closer look. What looks like an ordinary 25-cent coin could be far more interesting to collectors if it has the right condition, an unusual error, or a combination of features that makes it stand out. Millions of Washington quarters were produced in the early 1990s, and most 1992D quarters are common coins that are worth around their face value in circulated condition. But coin collecting is never simply about the date on the coin. The real excitement comes from discovering the exceptions, the coins that survived in unusually high condition, the pieces with dramatic mint errors, and the examples that attract serious collectors. In today's video on Hardest Penny, we're taking a detailed look at the 1992D Washington quarter, its history, design, production, condition, possible errors, and the factors that can make one example much more desirable than another. So if you have a 1992D quarter sitting in an old jar, drawer, coin roll, or collection, don't dismiss it too quickly. 1992D Washington quarter. The 1992D Washington quarter was struck at the Denver Mint and carries the famous D mint mark on the obverse, just below the neck of George Washington. The coin is made from the copper nickel-clad composition that became standard for regular U.S. quarters beginning in 1965. That means the 1992D quarter is not a silver quarter like the classic quarters dated before 1965. Instead, it has an outer layer of copper nickel bonded to a copper core. This distinction is important because people sometimes assume that any older-looking quarter might contain silver. A normal 1992D quarter does not have the same silver composition as a pre-1965 Washington quarter. The obverse features the portrait of George Washington facing left, with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1992. On the reverse, you see the traditional Washington quarter design featuring an eagle with outstretched wings. The inscriptions include United States of America, E Pluribus Unum, $quarter, and other lettering around the design. Although this design may look familiar, every small detail matters when you're examining a coin for collectible value. The first thing you should check is the mint mark. On a 1992 quarter, the presence of a D tells you that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. A 1992P quarter came from Philadelphia, while 1992S quarter was generally associated with proof production. For collectors searching through pocket change, the 1992D is one of the pieces they may encounter because Denver-produced coins entered circulation throughout the United States. Now comes the most important point. Simply finding a 1992D quarter does not automatically mean you have a rare or extremely valuable coin. Most examples are relatively common. If your coin has heavy circulation, scratches, discoloration, rim damage, or worn details, its collector premium may be very limited. But condition can dramatically change the conversation. Imagine finding a 1992D quarter that appears almost untouched. The surfaces are bright, the original luster is still visible, Washington's hair and facial details are sharp, and the reverse design shows very little evidence of contact with other coins. That type of preservation can attract collectors who specialize in high-grade modern coins. Modern coins may have been produced in large numbers, but finding exceptionally preserved examples can still be challenging because coins often collide with one another during production, transportation, storage, and circulation. One of the biggest enemies of coin value is damage. A coin can have a desirable date and mint mark, but still be worth very little if it has been heavily scratched or cleaned. This is why you should never aggressively polish a potentially collectible coin. Cleaning can leave hairline scratches and unnatural surfaces that reduce collector appeal. If you believe your 1992D quarter has unusual characteristics, it is generally better to preserve it exactly as you found it. Another area that deserves attention is mint errors. Errors occur when something goes wrong during the minting process. Some errors are extremely dramatic and can be highly collectible, while others are minor and may have little additional value. When examining your 1992D quarter, look carefully at the date, mint mark, lettering, rim, edge, and major design elements. A major off-center strike is one example that could make a normal quarter much more interesting. If the blank planchet was not properly centered when it was struck, part of the design may be missing from the coin, while a noticeable portion of the blank area remains visible. The more dramatic and clearly genuine the error, the more attention it may receive from collectors. Another possibility is a broad strike or other major striking error. These unusual pieces can occur when a normal collar mechanism does not properly contain the planchet during striking. The resulting coin may have an unusual shape or expanded appearance. Again, not every unusual-looking coin is a valuable mint error. Damage after the coin leaves the mint can create strange shapes, flattened rims, scratches, and bends that sometimes look like errors to an inexperienced collector. This is why authentication matters. If you think your 1992D quarter has a genuine mint error, compare it carefully with known examples and consider professional evaluation before assuming a huge value. A genuine mint error should have characteristics consistent with the minting process, not simply damage caused by machines, tools, or other objects after the coin entered circulation. The edge is another place worth checking. Run your eyes around the edge without damaging the coin. Look for anything that appears abnormal compared with a normal clad quarter. The copper-colored core can normally be seen along the edge of clad quarter, so seeing a copper-colored line does not automatically mean the coin is an error. You should also inspect the surfaces under good lighting. Tilt the coin slowly and watch how the light moves across Washington's portrait and the eagle on the reverse. Original mint luster can appear very differently from the dull appearance of a heavily circulated coin. Look for unusual doubling, missing details, die cracks, die chips, or other features that appear to be part of the original strike rather than post-mint damage. One especially important lesson for new collectors is the difference between true double dies and machine doubling. These two things can look similar, but they are not the same. A genuine double die results from a die making or hubbing process and can show specific separation and shape characteristics. Machine doubling can create a flat, shelf-like appearance and generally does not carry the same collector significance. If your 1992D quarter seems to show doubling, don't immediately assume you've discovered a fortune. Study the details carefully. The condition of the coin can also determine whether professional grading is worthwhile. Grading companies examine coins for factors such as wear, surface quality, strike, luster, marks, and overall eye appeal. A high-grade certified example can be more desirable than an ordinary circulated coin, especially when collectors are competing for top-condition pieces. But remember, value is never guaranteed simply because a coin is old, has a mint mark, or appears unusual. The market determines what collectors are actually willing to pay. Auction records, certified population reports, and comparable sales are much more useful than random online claims suggesting that every 1992D quarter is worth thousands of dollars. So, what should you do if you find one? First, don't clean it. Second, handle it carefully by the edges. Third, compare it with a normal 1992D Washington quarter. Fourth, inspect the date, mint mark, design details, surfaces, and edge under magnification. And if you discover something genuinely unusual, seek an experienced numismatist or reputable grading service for a professional opinion. The exciting part of coin collecting is that you don't need to start with a rare 19th century coin to learn something valuable. A 1992D Washington quarter can teach you about mint marks, modern coinage, grading, errors, die varieties, preservation, and the difference between face value and collector value. Most examples won't make you rich, and it's important to be realistic about that. But the possibility of finding an unusual variety or major mint error is exactly what makes searching through old change so entertaining. So before you throw that 1992D Washington quarter into a vending machine, take another look. Check the D mint mark. Examine Washington's portrait. Study the date. Inspect the reverse. Look around the rim and edge. Search for genuine minting abnormalities and pay close attention to the coin's condition. You might simply discover an ordinary quarter worth 25 cents, but you could also discover an unusually preserved or genuinely interesting collectible that deserves a place in your collection. Here at Hardest Penny, our goal is to help you look at everyday coins differently. Every coin has a story, And sometimes the smallest details are what make a piece worth investigating. So check your change, search those old coin jars, and never judge a coin only by its face value. If you have a 1992D Washington quarter, take a close look before spending it. And if you find something unusual, that's when the real treasure hunt begins. Before you spend a 1993D Washington quarter, stop and take a second look. That familiar 25-cent coin may seem completely ordinary, but collectors know that the real story is often hidden in tiny details. A date, a mint mark, the condition of the surfaces, or an unusual mint-made error can completely change how interesting a coin becomes. Most 1993D Washington quarters are common and are not worth thousands of dollars, but that doesn't mean every example should be ignored. In the world of coin collecting, ordinary coins can become exciting discoveries when you know exactly what to look for. Today on Hardest Penny, we're taking a close look at the 1993D Washington quarter, including its history, design, composition, condition, possible errors, varieties, and the characteristics that could make an example more desirable to collectors. So if you have a 1993D quarter in your pocket, an old collection, a coin jar, or a roll of change, don't spend it until you've inspected it carefully. 1993D Washington Quarter. The 1993D Washington Quarter was produced at the Denver Mint and can be identified by the small d mint mark located on the obverse beneath George Washington's neck. This quarter belongs to the modern clad era of Washington quarters. Unlike Washington quarters dated 1964 and earlier, a normal 1993D quarter does not contain 90% silver. Instead, it uses the copper-nickel-clad composition that became standard for regular U.S. quarters beginning in 1965. The obverse features the famous portrait of George Washington facing left. Around the portrait are the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date 1993. The reverse shows the traditional eagle design, surrounded by inscriptions identifying the United States and the denomination. At first glance, the design looks like millions of other Washington quarters, but collectors learn to examine these familiar details closely because small differences can sometimes reveal important information. The first thing to check is the date. Make sure you actually have a 1993 quarter and not a similar-looking date that has been worn or damaged. Next, locate the mint mark. The D indicates Denver production. A 1993P quarter was struck at Philadelphia, while proof examples were produced at San Francisco. That small letter can be important when identifying exactly what coin you have. Now let's talk about the most important factor for an ordinary 1993D quarter: condition. Most quarters from 1993 entered circulation, meaning they were handled by millions of people and traveled through banks, stores, vending machines, cash registers, and coin-counting equipment. As a result, many examples have scratches, contact marks, dull surfaces, and areas of wear. But imagine finding a 1993D quarter that appears almost untouched. The original luster is still visible. Washington's hair has sharp details. The lettering is crisp. The eagle on the reverse has strong definition, and the fields are relatively clean. A coin preserved at a very high grade can be much more interesting to collectors than a heavily circulated example. Modern coins can be surprisingly challenging to find in excellent condition because they often receive marks before collectors ever see them. Coins are struck in large quantities and then processed in bulk. They can collide with other coins and develop small contact marks. They may also become scratched or damaged during transportation and circulation. That's why an exceptionally clean example can attract attention even when the date itself is not rare. If you discover a potentially valuable 1993D quarter, one of the worst things you can do is clean it. Many new collectors believe that making a coin shiny will make it more valuable. In reality, cleaning can permanently damage the original surface. Polishing, rubbing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can create unnatural hairlines and reduce collector appeal. If you think your quarter has potential, leave it exactly as you found it. The next thing to examine is the possibility of a mint error. Mint errors can happen when something goes wrong during the manufacturing process. Some errors are minor and common, while others can be dramatic and highly collectible. The key is understanding the difference between a genuine mint error and damage that happened after the coin left the mint. One of the most obvious errors to look for is an off-center strike. Another possibility is a broad strike. A normal coin is struck inside a collar that helps control its shape. If the collar does not properly perform its function during striking, the coin can spread outward and develop an unusual appearance. A genuine broad strike can be collectible, but again, you should compare the coin with known examples before making assumptions. The rim deserves special attention too. Look around the entire circumference of the coin. Is the rim consistent? Does one area look unusually wide, flat, or distorted? Does the edge appear normal for a clad quarter? These observations can help you determine whether you're looking at a possible minting problem or simply damage. Damage is extremely common, and it can imitate errors. A quarter dropped into machinery, crushed by equipment, squeezed in a vise, or hit by another object can develop strange shapes and marks. Post-mint damage does not normally have the same collector value as a genuine mint error. That's why context matters. A real error should make sense within the minting process. You should also examine the lettering and numbers. Sometimes collectors see unusual shapes around the date or inscriptions and immediately think they have found a double die. But not every apparent doubling is a valuable double die. Machine doubling can create flat, shelf-like secondary images, while genuine double die varieties have different characteristics caused during die production. The mint mark is another area worth inspecting, although you should not assume that every unusual-looking D is a rare variety. A mint mark can appear different because of wear, damage, die characteristics, lighting, or photography. Modern mint marks are part of the die itself, so the characteristics should be studied in the context of the entire coin. Another major factor is eye appeal. Two coins can have similar grades, but look very different to collectors. A coin with attractive original luster, strong details, clean surfaces, and minimal distracting marks can be more appealing than an example with the same basic grade but poor visual quality. If your 1993 D quarter appears unusually nice, you might consider having it professionally graded. Third-party grading services evaluate the coin, assign a grade, and encapsulate it in a protective holder. Certification can make it easier for buyers and collectors to understand the condition of the coin. However, grading costs money, so it usually makes more sense when there is a reasonable possibility that the coin's value justifies the expense. This is also where collectors need to be careful about exaggerated online claims. You may see headlines claiming that a particular 1993 D Washington quarter is worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Such claims should never be accepted automatically. A coin's value depends on its authenticity, condition, variety, error status, demand, and actual market sales. A normal circulated 1993 D quarter should not be treated as a fortune simply because someone posted an enormous number online. If the answer to these questions is no, your coin may simply be a normal 1993 D quarter. And that's perfectly fine. Coin collecting isn't only about finding a life-changing treasure. It's about learning how coins are made, understanding history, recognizing varieties, and developing the skills to identify something unusual when it appears. The 1993 D Washington quarter is especially useful for beginners because it teaches an important lesson. Age alone does not determine value. A coin from the 1990s may be more interesting than a much older coin if it has a rare error or exceptional preservation. At the same time, an older coin may still be worth only a modest amount if it is common and heavily worn. So if you find a 1993 D quarter today, start with the basics. Confirm the date. Locate the D mint mark. Examine both sides under good lighting. Check Washington's portrait, the date, the lettering, the eagle, the rim, and the edge. Look for unusual doubling, dramatic off-center striking, broad strikes, die cracks, die chips, or other features that appear to have originated during production. Most importantly, separate genuine mint characteristics from ordinary damage. And remember, never clean the coin before you know what you have. Put it somewhere safe, preferably in a proper, non-damaging holder, and avoid touching the surfaces unnecessarily. If you discover a feature that looks genuinely unusual, Research it carefully and consider professional authentication. The 1993 D Washington quarter may not be a rare silver quarter, and most examples will not command spectacular prices. But that doesn't make the coin uninteresting. Every example is part of America's modern coinage history, and a small number may have characteristics that make them stand out from the millions of ordinary pieces. So before you toss your next 1993 D Washington quarter into a vending machine, take a closer look. That little D could be the beginning of a fascinating coin hunt. Check the surfaces, study the details, inspect the rim, and search for genuine mint-made abnormalities. You might find nothing unusual, and that's the most likely outcome. But the thrill of collecting comes from knowing exactly what to look for when something extraordinary does appear. This is hardest penny, where everyday pocket change becomes a treasure hunt. Keep checking your coins, keep learning, and never assume that a coin is worthless just because it looks ordinary at first glance. The next interesting discovery could be sitting quietly in your pocket right now.